Hello folks, Jason Chrisman here, JC's Bees. In today's video I want to talk about 5 key things that you need to be keeping an eye on for your hives. These 5 things are going to help make your hives stronger, keep them healthy, and get them ready for winter. So you might want to pay attention in this video. Number 1, the very first thing you're going to want to check and keep an eye on is the food stores. Are the bees bringing in plenty of nectar and pollen to keep them thriving? The easiest way to check the pollen itself is to check the hives during midday. See if the bees are bringing back pollen. If they're not, then you know they're lacking protein. And maybe you should consider feeding a pollen patty. The pollen patty is going to fall on my number 3 step, and I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. As far as the nectar, and the comb, what you want to do is you want to pull out a nice frame of brood. Look on the edges of that frame of brood and see if you see any nectar stored for the bees to feed that brood. If you do not, then you're going to want to feed. If you do, I would probably hold off on feeding for a little bit longer. I would assume that your bees are probably bringing in a decent nectar flow and don't really need you adding more syrup or more food to the situation. That'll fall on rule number 5 that we'll talk about here in a couple minutes. So check your hives, make sure they have plenty of food, and if you think that they are not bringing in very much nectar, maybe you're in an area that's not getting any rain, rather dry, maybe you're in an area that doesn't have any goldenrod or aster. I kind of fall under rule number 1. I have aster and goldenrod out to yin-yang, acres and acres of it. But it's been nearly 6 weeks since we've had any significant rain. Kind of hoping to get rain in the next couple days, but we will see. Number 2, robbing. Robbing is a big issue this time of year, and that's because a lot of insects, not just bees, are looking to build up their food stores so they can survive the winter months. For that reason, robbing increases this time of year. If you got hives that are bringing in this goldenrod nectar, you can smell it from many feet away from the hives. And so do all these other insects that are looking to build up for winter. So they know right where to go. So this time of year, if you think your hives are being robbed, you're going to want to reduce the entrances. Now, depending upon what kind of entrance you got, you'll have to act accordingly. Over here, you can see I've got a block of wood blocking off 3/4 of the, or pretty much 3/4 of the entrance. Over here you can see I've got a disc entrance, and I've pretty much got it mostly closed. The top one is closed. Over here they don't have a top entrance, only that. So that's going to make it a lot easier for these girls to protect their entrance because they've only got that small opening. Same with here. Now if I would leave that all the way open, I'm sure I would see robbing. Same with over here. If I would have that top one open, I'm sure I would see robbing. So keep an eye on it. If you think your hives are being robbed, reduce the entrance. Another thing you can do to deter the robbing is go 100 yards away from your hives. Set up an open feeder. In that particular open feeder, add some essential lemongrass oil. Maybe even put a couple drops on top of the feeder just to get the smell stirred up in the air. And what that's going to do is it's going to take the bees over to where your feeder is, and they're going to leave your hives alone. So there's a little trick for you. Number 3, mite load. I know I've stressed this a lot over the last few videos, but I can't stress it enough how important it is that right now we are acting as beekeepers to keep the mite load as low as possible going into the cold season. This is going to greatly help the bees, and by acting now, we're going to allow the mite load to drop, and with that low mite count, we're going to have healthier, stronger bee colonies going into winter. But if we would wait until the weather started to get cold, we would still have the sick, disease-infested bees because we have the higher mite count. And these mites, they really weaken and sicken our bees. We can't so much see the signs of this weakness and sickness during the summer months, unless it's something like deformed wing virus that's actually visual. But in the wintertime, it really just beats them up. Be like you going into winter being sick. Wouldn't be a good thing. So do your part to keep the mite count as low as possible. Do mite washes, however you go about doing your mite counts. Do them, and do them frequently, and treat accordingly. Number 4, hive beetles. Now, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, feeding pollen patties is a good idea if you're not seeing any pollen coming in. Bees need pollen to raise brood, and we need them to be raising brood right now because we want a large cluster of bees going into winter. Well, the tricky part about feeding pollen patties too soon in the season is if you've got hive beetles, they're going to take over the colony. Hive beetles like to move into that pollen patty, lay a bunch of eggs, and before long you're going to have hive beetle larvae everywhere. And that can really hurt the colony, which we don't want to do. So if you're one of these people that have to feed a pollen patty, do it with caution, and I wouldn't feed too many in a row. And I wouldn't, maybe even try feeding a smaller piece of patty instead of a whole patty at once. Experiment, try different things. If you have hive beetles, check out the Beetle Buster board, or check out a beetle barn, or try one of the beetle blasters. The beetle barn and the beetle blaster are listed in my Amazon store, listed down in this video's description, if that's something you're interested in trying. Hive beetles are a nasty pest. They're not quite as bad as the mites, but they're getting there. And if we give them the upper hand, they're surely going to run with it. So it's up to us to do our part to keep the hive beetles population to a minimum. Another idea you can use is the Swiffer sheet idea, and I have a video on that, which I'll link at the end of this video. The fifth and final thing to keep a close eye on is how much room is in the brood chamber. You don't want them to backfill the brood chamber with nectar, because what that's going to do is take space away from the queen, and she won't have any place to lay. And like I just said, we want our hives to be strong and have a big cluster going into winter. We can't have that big cluster if the queen doesn't have a place to lay. So if you're seeing a bunch of honey frames down in the brood box, you need to either pull those and extract them, or you need to pull those and replace them with a frame of drawn comb. I wouldn't suggest using a new frame with just foundation, just because that's going to take more resources and time to get drawn out, and the bees could just plain ignore it this time of year because they don't have the resources or the time to get it drawn out. So keep a close eye on this. If you happen to pull frames to extract, make sure you stick something in their spot or place until you bring those extracted frames back. You don't want to leave a bunch of empty spaces in there because it could go horribly wrong. I can tell you many of times, within good intentions, I've pulled frames, and let's say I've left 8 frames in a 10 frame box planning to come back that afternoon, and then something happens and I totally forget. I return 2 weeks later and there's a bunch of cross comb drawn between frames. It's a big mess. So take this little tip I'm giving you and stick something in that spot until you return, even if it is a brand new frame. So I hope you found this video helpful, folks, and if so, you'll throw me a big thumbs up and help boost it in the YouTube search ranks. And if you haven't taken time to subscribe, please do so, and make sure you click on that little bell so you get notified when I release new videos. Oh boy, I tell you, the last couple of weeks I've been testing this hive with the sumac berries, and I hope to release the results of that here very soon, but I still want to keep running a couple tests throughout the next week or so. It's probably going to be a couple weeks before that video is going to be released, but keep your eye open for it. I know a lot of people are interested to see what the results are. I'd like to give you a little tidbit on what I've learned so far, but it's top secret. Sorry. The nectar flow on the goldenrod is extremely strong right here, even with the lack of rain. Sitting here right now, it smells like I have two socks stuffed up my nose that have been worn for a couple weeks. That's how pungent the smell is of the goldenrod nectar. Yep, very, very strong. And just like I keep telling you folks, it does have a very pungent, stinky foot smell. A lot of you new beekeepers are probably starting to smell that now and think, what in the world? That is horrible. But I tell you, after a couple of years, you're like, man, I love the smell of that. It just grows on you for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe it's the smell of money. Not honey, but money. Because yeah, if you're a beekeeper, you're probably selling a little bit of honey. And I tell you, that goldenrod honey is one of my favorite. I love the fall honey. So thanks for watching today's video. I hope you'll subscribe if you haven't. And we'll see you next week, folks. Thanks for watching JC's Bees.